last thing I expected to see on Maplewood Drive was Karen Whitfield, the HOA queen, sprinting down the street, arms flailing, screaming like a siren chased by a swarm of bees. And the best part, she earned every sting. A few weeks ago, she started with petty complaints about my bees. But when she crossed a line and started stealing my packages, that was the moment I decided to let her learn a lesson she'd never forget. What happened next? Let's just say Karen learned the hard way, that messing with the wrong neighbor and the wrong hive could come with consequences she never saw coming. I met Karen Whitfield the first time when she strutted up my driveway, clipboard in hand, oversized sunglasses hiding her calculating eyes. She was ready to do battle, and I had no idea yet just how far she'd take it. "Excuse me," she said, already sounding annoyed. "Are you aware that you're keeping dangerous insects so close to residential property?" I glanced up from my hive, smiling through the mesh veil. "They're bees, ma'am, harmless unless provoked." She didn't buy it. They could sting someone, especially children. I raised an eyebrow. "We don't have any kids on this street." She pursed her lips, clearly offended. "That's Mrs. Whitfield to you, and I'll be bringing this up at the next HOA meeting." I let her leave without a fight. The first warning, I thought. But I knew this wasn't just about my bees. No, Karen Whitfield wasn't content simply enforcing HOA rules. She believed she was the neighborhood's ruler. A woman who wasn't used to hearing no, much less respecting anyone else's boundaries. A few days later, she was already circling my porch like a vulture. It wasn't just about my bees anymore. It was about control, and I had a feeling that's exactly what she'd come to take. It started with small things. Missing packages, weird notes taped to my door, a few passive-aggressive comments about safety concerns. At first I brushed it off. Maybe someone was just being paranoid. But when Diane asked if I'd received my Amazon order one morning, and I had to admit I hadn't, I felt the sting of something off. It wasn't the first time, but it was the first time I noticed the trend. A box always small, nothing expensive, just mine would be missing. And each time, there was no sign of it, no stray packaging, no delivery notification. Just gone. I checked my security cameras. At first I assumed it was some porch pirate, maybe a neighbor's kid. But when I noticed the plug had been carefully pulled from the wall, clean, no sign of struggle, I realized the thief knew what they were doing. That night, I told Paul, my neighbor, about it. Paul's the quiet type, minds his business, but keeps a sharp eye on everything. "You didn't hear it from me," he whispered, glancing toward Karen's house. "But I saw Karen take one of your boxes last week. She said she was just taking it inside for safekeeping." I laughed, thinking he was joking. "She took my mail," Paul nodded grimly. "She said it was an HOA regulation or something." Now I knew it wasn't just some weird coincidence. It was Karen, and it was time for me to figure out how far she'd go. The next day, I saw her on her usual walk with Princess, her little white dog. Karen always took the same route, moving slowly like she owned the street. As always, she stopped by my porch right at the corner where Tony the mailman left my packages. I watched as Karen bent down, pretending to read a label, and then slipped the package under her arm. My heart raced. This wasn't just passive-aggressive anymore. It was theft. "Need help carrying that, Karen?" I called out from the driveway, pretending to trim the hedge. She jumped, looking panicked. "Oh, I was just making sure no one steals it," she muttered, clutching the box like it was a treasure. I smiled, maintaining my calm. "Good to know you're volunteering for porch patrol," I said, my voice light. She didn't laugh. Instead, she glared at me, spun on her heel, and marched back to her house. That was when I realized that Karen wasn't just trying to control my bees, she was trying to control everything. Her actions weren't about protecting the neighborhood. They were about staking claim to everything and everyone in it. The stolen packages kept disappearing. Small things at first, tools, gardening, gadgets, even a few parts for the hives. Nothing expensive, but the principle was the issue. It wasn't just about what was taken, it was about Karen deciding she had the right to do whatever she wanted, including taking what didn't belong to her. It wasn't until I lost the smoker box replacement part that I snapped. That part was crucial to my beekeeping, and it hadn't been cheap. That was when I decided it was time to take action. I set up a hidden camera this time, with a backup power supply. I wanted to catch her in the act. At exactly 10:42 a.m. Tony, the mailman, delivered my package tucked safely behind the potted fern on the porch. It looked normal, nothing unusual. By 11:15, my phone pinged with a motion alert. There she was. Same pink blazer, same clipboard. Karen walked past, casually, glanced around, and sure enough, bent down and picked up the package. She held it for a moment as if reading the label, then casually slipped it under her arm and walked away. I grabbed my keys, jumped in the truck, and followed the GPS signal. My phone directed me straight to her driveway. There it was, my package sitting in her garage, surrounded by other boxes. Boxes that weren't hers. I pulled into her driveway, rolled down the window, and greeted her casually. "Morning, Karen," I said, my voice as sweet as honey. She froze, clutching the box. "Excuse me, you wouldn't happen to have my package, would you?" I asked, keeping my tone even. Karen's eyes darted to the stack of boxes in her garage. "That one," she stammered. "I was just about to return it." "Funny," I said, raising an eyebrow. "It's addressed to Michael Turner. You know that's my name? And this isn't just about a box anymore. This is about you taking what doesn't belong to you." She stepped back, trying to regain control. "This is harassment," I grinned. "Sure it is. But what you don't know is I've got a little more evidence than you think." The next day, Greg Sanders, the HOA vice president, called me. Mike, Karen's filing a complaint. She says you're stalking her and using illegal tracking devices." I laughed. "Illegal? She's the one stealing from me. I have proof." I was thinking about calling the sheriff myself. Greg hesitated. "Let's not escalate this. I'll talk to Karen. But maybe you could." No need, I cut him off. "I've already got everything I need. The sheriff's welcome to see the footage." Greg didn't argue. I could hear the nervousness in his voice. He knew the truth, but he couldn't do anything about Karen. That night I set my trap. A simple fake package, nothing too fancy. I packed a GPS tracker inside, along with a bold note that read, "Smile for the camera, Karen." On the outside I labeled it, "Fragile Organic Wax Samples." By 9:30 a.m., I knew it was time. Tony dropped it off just like the others. I watched it all unfold, live through my camera feed. 10 minutes later, Karen appeared walking down the street in her familiar pink blazer. She eyed the package like a hawk, then bent down, snatched it, and disappeared down the street. I followed the GPS tracker, keeping my distance. This time, she didn't see me. The tracker led me straight to her driveway again, and when I confronted her in person, she was caught. No escape. "Are we really doing this, Karen?" I asked, holding up my phone. "The game is over." The HOA board meeting was packed. Karen stood at the front, her usual self-assured expression plastered on her face as she began speaking about her diligent efforts to protect the neighborhood. "I'm just trying to safeguard the community," she said, a bit too loudly, "removing unattended packages and keeping this place secure." The audience barely reacted, but I could see the few familiar faces in the back, including Paul, who shot me a supportive look. I raised my hand, and the room fell silent. "Madam President," I said, letting the words hang in the air, "are you authorized to remove packages from private property?" Karen's confident smile faltered. "This isn't about me, Mr. Turner. We need to maintain safety." "I think it's about everyone," I replied, standing and walking to the front with a flash drive in hand, "including the part where you've been stealing my packages." The room went quiet. Her face drained of color as I slid the flash drive into the projector. I hit play, and the footage of her picking up my package played on the screen. Her hands shook as she tried to regain control. "That's edited," she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Karen, that looks pretty real," Greg Sanders, the vice president, said, squinting at the image. "That's you." The room began to murmur, and Karen's tight smile cracked as a few residents started to whisper. I leaned in, holding my ground, as Karen struggled to find an excuse. "I was just protecting the neighborhood," she said, her voice shaky. I raised an eyebrow. Protecting it from what exactly? Fragile honeycomb. I could feel the eyes of the room on me, and that was when the true weight of the evidence hit home. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Jenkins, started to chuckle from the back. Then another voice chimed in. Maybe she's allergic to accountability. The laughter spread quickly through the room, a few muffled giggles breaking the tension. Greg rubbed his forehead, clearly uncomfortable. "Karen, you've been caught. You can't keep making these claims." Karen's face twisted into a scowl, but it was no use. The evidence had spoken louder than her manipulation. The camera footage, the GPS data, it all laid bare her deceit. Greg, looking exasperated, finally spoke up. "Karen, the board finds no violation of HOA rules. The bees stay, and the matter is closed." Karen's eyes burned with fury, but she held her tongue. It was over. She stormed out, but not before muttering, "You think this is over? You'll regret this." She was shaking with rage, and for the first time, I saw just how unhinged she really was. The laughter lingered long after she left, and it felt like the entire weight of the neighborhood had shifted. Karen's reign was over. The tyrant of Maplewood Grove had been exposed, and now the community had reclaimed its power. The next morning, the neighborhood felt lighter. Karen's departure from the HOA meeting had stirred up more than just a few laughs. It had sparked a sense of unity among the residents. For the first time in months, the air in Maplewood Grove was filled with relief. People waved to each other with more warmth, and I noticed a lot more chatter around the neighborhood. I was on my porch sipping my morning coffee when Paul strolled by with a grin on his face. "Mike, you're the man. You really put her in her place," I chuckled. "It wasn't just me, Paul. It was the whole street. Everyone here saw through her act." Diane came outside and joined me, handing me a fresh cup. She sat down beside me on the swing. "It's peaceful again," she said, her voice content. "Funny how things change once the noise of one person's ego disappears." I smiled, looking around. It felt like we'd all won, not just me. It wasn't about bees or packages anymore. It was about reclaiming our peace. Our community was stronger than ever, and for the first time since I moved here, I felt like Maplewood Grove was truly mine. As for Karen, her time at the top didn't last long. The county had filed a report about her illegal pesticide use and the damage she caused to county-registered property. The HOA board voted to suspend her indefinitely, pending an investigation. Greg, after dealing with all the fallout, resigned as vice president. "I'm too old for this circus," he told me, later shaking his head in relief. It didn't end with her suspension, though. Karen was fined for trespassing, vandalism, and using chemicals illegally. She tried to fight it, but there was no way to escape the truth. Her house, which had been on the market for months, was finally sold, though at a steep loss. She moved away quietly, and the new owners seemed to be a young couple, eager to start fresh in the neighborhood. It was a quiet, almost poetic end to her saga. I wasn't expecting it, but a week later, a small envelope arrived at my doorstep. Diane opened it and handed it to me. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakably Karen's. "Michael, I know you think I got what I deserved. Maybe I did. The doctor said I was lucky. But I've had time to think about this place, about you, about the bees. You were right. I wanted to control everything. Maybe because everything else in my life was falling apart. When my husband left, the HOA became the only thing I could run. I see now how pathetic that sounds, but it was something to hold on to. You don't have to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I sold the house to pay my medical bills. The new owners seem nice. Take care of them the way you took care of your hives. Karen." I sat there for a while reading the letter. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was close enough. Diane walked over looking at me with that half-questioning, half-understanding gaze. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Everyone learns eventually. Some just need more stings than others." As for the rest of the neighborhood, the change was undeniable. The HOA, which had once ruled with an iron fist, was dissolved. In its place was a voluntary neighborhood committee focused on common sense and community, not fines and arbitrary rules. People were happier, more willing to pitch in. No more complaints, no more ridiculous regulations. A few weeks later, I saw a young couple move into Karen's old house. I smiled to myself knowing they would never know the full story, and that was fine. Later that evening, as the sun set, I took a jar of honey from my kitchen and placed it on the front porch of Karen's old house. No note, no message, just the golden honey sitting in the light. I figured the new owners would enjoy it, or maybe Karen would see it one day and remember what she'd lost. As the light from the street lamps flickered on and the bees hummed around me, I realized how far we'd come. The noise, the tension, it was all gone. The next morning, I found a group of neighbors gathered at my fence. Paul brought over a six-pack of beer, and Mrs. Jenkins showed up with a plate of lemon bars. Even Greg, who had always been so formal, was there with a sheepish grin. "We might not have the HOA anymore," Paul said, laughing, "but we've got something better, a neighborhood that knows how to take care of itself." I raised my bottle, feeling the warmth of the moment settle in. "To teamwork," I said, and for the first time, I truly believed that was the key. Later that evening, Diane leaned her head on my shoulder as we sat on the porch, watching the last light of day fade behind the trees. "You realize you've become the wise old beekeeper of Maplewood, right?" I smiled and took a deep breath, enjoying the peace of it all. "I was aiming for neighborhood menace," I said, "but I'll take that promotion." She laughed softly, resting against me. The world felt right again. The neighborhood was buzzing, not with complaints or chaos, but with laughter, respect, and a quiet sense of balance.